Ready.
You got to give it the smile. There you go. That's good. What's up, everybody? I'm excited about this interview for a lot of different reasons. And today, as of this recording, it is Juneteenth. And I knew about Juneteenth probably in my 20s, mid 20s. I didn't really understand the significance of it. I just found out about it. And then it wasn't until I was about 30, so like 5 years ago, where it was like Juneteenth should be a bigger deal than it is. And so I was thinking about, how can I share the information that I've learned, what can I do? And I could not think of anybody better than my good friend, Jada Drew. Now, everybody knows whenever you listen to my show, whenever you watch my show, I always introduce everybody as a friend. But Jada really is a friend. I've known Jada for a long time. She's one of those friends that helped me get money, y'all. Like, you got different friends that you grow up with and different things like that. But Jada's one of those friends. But when people think of Jada, they think results, impact, innovation, and community. And Jada takes intentional time with clients to ensure optimum results and gives them an engaged experience. This is evidence as she was recently selected as a small business minority person of the year. Jada is passionate about working with leaders and serving as a catalyst for growth as an intentional trainer, coach, and consultant. She is the CEO of Social Designs, a leadership and diversity firm, and she's the visionary behind the great seminar, great event Bloom, which provides innovative solutions for inclusion. And so I've known Jada. She's been doing her thing all over the world. She's been recognized as the United Nations. I can't pronounce that. Is that an acronym, Jada? What is
it's an acronym.
DPI. I thought we was playing bingo. DPINGO. As the United Nations DPINGO speaker and featured in Made in Greensboro. She's an activist. She's active in the community. She's a board member and current Arts Fund chair of Arts Greensboro. I could go on and on and on about Jada, but like I said before, she's a friend. Jada, welcome to the show. How you doing? How you feeling?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm feeling good. I really appreciate the invite. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
All things considered, right? All things considered.
That's true. There's a lot going on in the world right now.
So when I met Jada way back in the early 2000s, she was working in higher education. She worked at Guilford College. She brought me in to speak. And what was your role at Guilford?
I was then the Africana community coordinator and then the multicultural education director afterwards.
So one thing, and I don't remember if I said this to you or not, but I remember going to your office. You had your little office, and you had all this stuff on your door. You had like all of these different conferences you've gone to and all this stuff. And I remember looking at the conference. I'm like, wait, like privilege? What? Like, what is that conference about? And Encore and all that stuff. And so you've been about this like diversity, leadership, life for a long time. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I guess I'll start with kind of where you started the conversation. So when we met, I was the Africana community coordinator at Guilford. And one thing I loved about that position is I had a very, very supportive staff that worked with me. And at the time, my director, she gave me the opportunity to start a course. And that course was called Africana Change. So that was one of the highlights, and I can talk more about that. I also had the opportunity to meet some amazing speakers that we would book, including yourself, Odell, to come to Guilford. And during that process, I had an opportunity to meet the founder of the White Privilege Conference. I also met a few speakers who spoke before at Encore, and that gave me an opportunity to expand my professionalism outside of just Guilford, but really think about ways to grow the conversation about diversity and inclusion. And I'll say Guilford, as an alum, I'm very proud alum of Guilford, and they give people they, as in the faculty, staff, and just the culture of Guilford, gives people opportunity to try things with best practices, with with academic advice, academic evidence, so to speak. So with Africana Change, for example, I had a conversation with a couple faculty members, and we were talking about how Black people are different and also how Black people are similar. And the conversation grew for me to then say, well, why don't we have a course or at least a conversation about inviting students who are of Africana descent, so people who are African, African American, students who were mixed race, students who were from the Caribbean, different countries on the continent of Africa, different locations in the United States. And we talked about what it meant to be different. We talked about ways that we can collaborate and come together. We traveled around the United States. We traveled to Brazil. And it gave me a very, very it gave me a lot of insight in how, as a community, as a Black community, how we can grow specifically by understanding who we are and where we come from. And part of that is really understanding the power of economic vitality and coming together to know where we all fit in growing the community. So I'll stop there because I don't want to go off on a tangent. But those were my favorite things from Guilford Africana Change.
Good deal. Good deal. Let's get into some of these questions, Jada. Now, the title of this is I Want to Be an Activist, but I don't want to get shot. What do I do? That's what it is. And this is going to be separate parts. So if you're watching this, I'm going to be interviewing some other people that I know that are related to activism. But I want to talk first of all, I want to ask you if life were perfect, right? I guess we'll start there. If everything was equal, what would life look like? Like, we know that Black people we got a different deal than white people. We know that it's different than Latino people. We know that it's different. But if everything was equal in your mind, what would it look like?
And I would say, that's a broad question. So what would it look like in my day-to-day? What would it look like in the classroom? What would it look like in different ways? So I'll just start with one of the examples, like in the classroom. So I think if things were equal or equitable, you wouldn't have learned about Juneteenth when you were in your 20s and really got into it in your 30s. I was talking to a friend of mine this morning and said, I didn't know anything about Juneteenth until I went to college. So if things were equitable, I think we would all understand when I say we all, meaning the different ethnic groups in the United States, we would all understand each other's contribution to this country in a way that doesn't just play Black people have a history of being slaves, because that puts us in a position to look at our history as something that's completely negative. But there are so many things that have come out of our culture and things that we've contributed to this country and worldwide. So I think that's a big thing that would change. And the product of that is overall respect, how we respect ourselves and know what we're capable of and how other people understand who we are. That then plays into implicit bias or explicit bias. So if I learned about Black people, whatever race I might be, and the only thing I know about them is that they were slaves and then they were poor and then there was Jim Crow, the level of respect implicitly is going to decrease. So I think that we definitely, from a school perspective, so I'm just talking about academics, if we were to teach each other the true histories of this country, I think things would be a lot different. And I remember, I'll say this last thing before you go to the next question. I remember when I learned about Black Wall Street. I was probably in the 10th grade when I learned about it, because I saw it on a marker in Durham. And I asked my dad about it and he shared some more information because he went to school in North Carolina Central, which was then North Carolina School for the Colors or something like that. I know it had the word colored in the title of the school. And then when I went to college, I learned more about Black Wall Streets because I was interested to understand not just how Black people were economically stable, but how we were together and how we had political power and how we took care of, policed our own communities and such. And so that pushed me to research Black Wall Street. So a couple of the conferences that you mentioned, I've actually had a chance to present around my research in Black Wall Street. So over a town in Miami, for example, down in North Carolina, Greensboro has a community that was a Black Wall Street. Most people just know about Tulsa, Oklahoma. Then there is Wilmington, North Carolina, where the only political coup happened in the United States. I shouldn't learn about that in college. You know what I mean? And so when I dug even deeper, I remember I learned about Galveston, Texas, and that's how I started to learn more about Juneteenth. But there's so many communities that have that history. And I just feel like if we know more about that, we can then replicate it and not feel like we're always starting from scratch.
I love that. And you mentioned education. I think it's huge coming from the higher education world, being a Black woman with multiple degrees, and not just, stopping your education at degrees, but continuing on to learn for yourself. I think education is one of those really, really sneaky things. And you mentioned implicit bias that kind of shifts that. And I want to ask you, you mentioned your dad. Juneteenth happens to fall on the, the start of Father's Day weekend. And one of those stigmas or stereotypes is that Black fathers are absent, right? Black fathers are absent. I grew up with my dad. I didn't grow up in the house with my dad, but I grew up, my dad was around, my stepdad was always around. Like, I always had Black men around me. So I want you to talk about like your life. You mentioned it a little bit when you asked your dad about Durham and Durham's Black Wall Street, but how did growing up kind of contribute to you wanting to know more about, our history?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So I was taught not only to know more and research and value education, but I was taught to do as well. And my father in particular, he shared his philosophies definitely verbally, one of the most direct communicators I've ever met in my life and probably ever will meet. And he also led by example. So he was a business owner along with his siblings. And so he had multiple businesses growing up. I grew up when he had a contracting business, building houses and things, doing different types of jobs. And so he made a point to hire local. And he also made a point to value every person that worked. So whether it's someone who's helping to design a project or someone who's, doing most of the labor, or if it's someone who he might contract to do the lawn work, like he would always treat every single person that he interacted with equally, or with the same, I'll say with the same respect. And so I always had in my mind, I can do any and everything I wanted to do. And I know that I have a voice to stand up for what I believe in. I would say that was a really big lesson for me. And it definitely came directly from my dad. My mom, she was big on education. So I learned a lot before I even went to school, as far as the semantics of reading and writing and all that. But she always taught me also to respect people, no matter who they are. And she's really good at asking why questions. So I learned that from her. And I think there are a lot more families than what we would normally see on television. Even now, you would think you would see more families. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of the shows that we grew up watching. We have a lot of reality shows. So I think a lot of times people don't even see that as an option because of the negativity that's there. But do we say it's the television's fault, the TV network's fault, or do we say that we're the ones portraying these characters?
Oh boy.
So I believe in taking responsibility for our own community and our own choices. I also believe in understanding when we're not treated correctly, and there has to be a balance. If there's not a balance, then the conversation can be null and void. If we're not talking about multiple pieces of the pie, it's going to take us a while to really move forward quicker.
I love that. And Black families matter, just like Black lives and all that great stuff. I love hearing about that because it's important. I mean, it's so important. Family is huge, and it's often overlooked. Now, Jay, I got a couple of doozies for you. These come from social media. I prepared you for some of them, but some of them I didn't. So first and foremost, a lot of protesting, a lot of marching is going on, has been going on since the murder of George Floyd and all of the other, I really call it like the racism trifecta with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. If I'm not marching and protesting in the streets every day or every week or whenever I'm off work or whatnot, what are some things that I can do to still help move us forward and move us closer to social justice and social equity?
You know, that's always a difficult. I always have an answer, and people don't like to hear my answer.
I want to hear it. That's why I brought you on. I want to hear it.
And I'm glad we're having this conversation. This is the first time I publicly talked about, what's been going on, because it's just been really hard to see over and over and over and over and over again these images. Like I went cold from social media just because I needed to just process things myself. But everybody has a role, and everybody can make a decision to do what they want to do, and we have to respect that. So that's the first thing. I've been seeing memes and comments. If you're silent, then you're part of the problem. If you're not protesting, you're part of the problem. If you don't put a black square in your social media, then you're not in solidarity. If you know what I mean? Like, to me, we have to get away from bullying each other to do something, because everybody has a skill. If I know that I'm an amazing writer, and I also know that most bills have a large, most bills that are passed, most laws that are passed, you typically have lobbyists in order to make sure that those politicians are influenced in a certain way. It's a part of the system. So if I'm a writer and I know that I can write persuasively, if I couple up with someone who can speak really well and we get together and go where we need to go to lobby, I need to do that. I don't need to be out in the street, because every single thing that I'll say it this way, social change is not just about a one thing. So even though we're seeing protests, even though we're seeing people upset in the streets, I mean, stopping your day-to-day traffic, all those disruptions are necessary. But everybody has a role. So you have your protester, you have your speaker, your public speaker. You have people who are able to persuade in different ways to even write laws. You have people who can run for office. And I think we have to find our sweet spot and then talk to each other about ways that we can utilize each other, instead of saying, oh, if you're not doing X, Y, Z, then it's not enough. So that's the first thing I say to people don't like for me to say. But directly answering your question, I think that we can use our voice, obviously, on any platform, social platform. I think we can also talk to people and have conversations with people who are not like us, people who have different opinions, just to engage in that civil discourse. As far as action, we can write to our local officials. We can also make sure that we go to the school board meetings. We can make sure that we go to the town council, the city council meetings, because we have a voice in that. We can also use our money to guide decisions in the country. And so I think those are just a few things that we can do collectively. There are tons and tons more, but I think first figure out what you're skilled in, then ask people locally that are engaged, what are some of the things that they need, and pair the two.
I love that last part you said, especially like ask people what they need. One thing that we've had candid conversations privately about a lot of different things, but that local piece, understanding what's going on in your local community, your city council, your county of commissioners, your different things like that, that is huge. That's really, really huge. A lot of people get distracted by the dude in the White House, whoever it is. They get distracted and they really don't pay attention to what's going on locally. So I think that's great advice. Use your voice. Make sure you understand your skill set. Write to officials. Write to them. Bombard them because they work for us. And we've got to make sure that we do that. And also show up. Like pull up. You know how the young folks say, pull up on them. Come to meetings, but be there physically, but also economically. And I want to echo this point a little bit, Jada, by asking you this question. So, reparations. Reparations. Bob Johnson, the founder of BET, he proposed a reparation package or whatnot. Not going to get into all the details of it, but they talked about it a little bit on Fox News. I want to ask you, Jada. This is just Jada and Odell talking right now. Should Black people get reparations?
Yes. I believe that Black people should receive reparations. The how and the what, I don't know. But when you look at the history of the United States, for example, people who were affected, I'll say this, who were in Japanese internment camps in the United States, they received reparations. If you look into not just the history, but the laws and the rules now for many Native American reservations, people receive funds right now, today. And it doesn't just go to the reservation and the reservation distributes the funds, but people receive funds directly. And so if we, as the Black community, if we have contributed not only to, I know we talk a lot about capitalism is the thing of the United States, but the enslaved Africans basically built the foundation of capitalism. When you study stock options, when you study the stock market, when you even look at insurance and how our country, how the system of insurance works, those things were funded and built by the system of slavery. And to say that we only contributed with our hands is such a myth. And even then, the enslaved Africans on plantations, they weren't just workers. They were engineers, they were blacksmiths, and I can go on and on and on. And so should we get reparations? Yes, most definitely. Some people ask the question, well, should it be people who can trace their lineage back to slavery? Should it be people who have parents who were immigrants from the continent of Africa? Should it be, if one parent is what some people would term foundational African American versus someone whose parent is an immigrant, let's say from, I don't know, Jamaica, how does that work? I don't know. I don't know how that will work, but I will say that we definitely should receive that in some way. And it should by far be more than 40 acres and a mule, which I hope it's not, because that is not valid.
Got it. I love what you said about Black people just weren't, in the field. Like we just weren't in the field. Oh, go pick that cotton. There was a lot of different things that we were doing. There's a lot of different things. You mentioned the insurance industry, as well as the banking industry, a lot of different things. And I hope the conversation continues. Now, I'm going to ask you this question, Jada.
Mm-hmm.
You and I, we're same age. Do you think in our lifetime that we'll see reparations?
I think so. Oh. I don't know how soon.
Oh.
I'm just really hopeful. I never thought I would have seen a Black president. And I never thought I would have seen, the response from a lot of businesses, corporations, government entities, schools. I mean, I'm seeing responses from different types of organizations that I personally have conversations with, whether they've been clients of mine or if they were interested in understanding diversity and inclusion and making their workplaces more inclusive. And so part of the response, as I mentioned before, I think it's kind of if you don't do it, then we're going to shame you. And I think that's, quite frankly, that's how some people are responding. I also think people are taking advantage of this moment.
Yeah.
When I say response specifically, for instance, Juneteenth is now a paid holiday for a lot of employees in different organizations, as well as how people are changing laws connected to police brutality, not connected to police, but police brutality. I'm just seeing so much. I'm seeing resources pop up on different people's websites. And so that's why I'm hopeful, because who would have known that the first 6 months of 2020 would have included all of what we've experienced. I couldn't have guessed what's happening in my wildest dreams, but that's why I'm hopeful. And I'll share another story that connects to why I'm hopeful. So my paternal grandfather was a farmer, and probably, I want to say in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a huge suit toward the government, the United States government, for denying Black farmers in particular to have access to loans to increase their farms, to increase productivity, to whatever they might have wanted to do, whether it was hire people or equipment, or there's a lot that happens with patents, with different seeds to keep certain pests off your land. So I mean, there's a lot that goes on with it, and so they were denied loans in the process, and so Black farmers were granted, I'm not going to call it reparations, but they were granted money from that suit. Was it enough, and does it compare to the fact that now there aren't a lot of Black farmers? Shout out to Black Cotton. If you all have a chance, go out to the Carolinian. Black Cotton is featured in the Carolinian today or this week. And so that's why I think it's possible. We have a precedent for it in the United States. And we also, there are people who are actively working toward reparations every single day. So there are different groups that are working toward it, and there are bills on the books.
I didn't know that. There are bills.
I'm gonna have to send it to you because I can't remember the name of them, but there is at least 4 that I've seen that have been proposed for reparations. So it hasn't been just lip service. People have been actively proposing it to our government.
Got it. Well, I just want everybody, if you're listening or you're watching or whatever, I just want you to just especially Black people, man, just pause for the ancestors. We appreciate all the pain and suffering they went through, because maybe I think in our lifetime we'll get it, Jada. I just think you and I will be very, very old. But I wanted to ask you this too. As we're closing out this interview, make sure you all check out JadaMonicaDrew.com. If you have a company, if you have a business that is looking for more diversity in leadership training, I promise you, Jada is one of the best in the business, and she encourages dialogue. And that's what's important, going back and forth. And I kind of want to start ending the interview on this. So a lot of people say things like, it's not my burden to teach white people about Black stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to teach my people about my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that? I know your business isn't about that, but I'm talking about you as an individual.
Oh, me as an individual, not necessarily about.
You know, your business, we're going to teach everybody.
Well, it all depends on what people want to know. I like teaching and having conversations. So for me, it's not a burden. I don't see it as a burden. And I have resources that I've developed to direct people to understand strategy, which is very, very different than teaching someone about what I know about Black history and my experience as a Black person. So there's a big, big, big difference between wanting to ask questions and how to change your organization and wanting to ask questions around how to coach you through issues. That's my professional job. So you need to pay for that. But when it comes to having a conversation, well, Jada, how do Black people do their hair? You know what I mean? How do you put on suntan lotion? I mean, people don't know. So I don't get offended. It's just a question. Like I tell this story often, and every time I tell it, I'm embarrassed. And I remember asking one of my white colleagues. She was telling me that she was going to a family reunion. Like, yeah, I'm going to a family reunion. We have it every year. This is what we do. And I was like, white people have family reunions? I'll never forget it. I was just as genuine as, I mean, I wasn't trying to be funny. Fine. I'd never heard of white people having family reunions. And so she looked at me, and I could tell she was a little upset. She looked at me like, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I just don't know. And then we engaged in a conversation. So, I mean, I think that's another thing. We haven't been taught to have conversations that aren't so heavy. You know, I feel like we've been taught to respond in a heavy way on both sides, on multiple sides, not just both sides. Those things that you're not supposed to ask. But that's personal. You can ask me anything. Either I'm going to tell you I'm not going to answer it because I don't feel comfortable, or I'm going to answer it. Or I might ask you, why do you ask me that? So when people ask questions, this is what I always say. If you ask someone the question, don't get offended when they don't answer it, because it's not their, they don't have to answer your question, and don't get offended how they answer your question. So I think that's something that we have to just get through as regular communicators with each other. To each other, I'm sorry.
Got it. I love it. Jada, I know you got something that just came out, and we'll close the interview on this. What is a new book? Sharpen Your Inclusion. What's that all about? Talk about that.
So I'm going to share 2 resources because I think it'll be helpful. So the comment that I had about giving people strategy, I'm big on resources, and I have 2. One, Sharpen Your Inclusion Edge. So this is a play-by-play of how individuals, groups, and organizational leaders can go from developing a diversity statement to creating a diversity, more so inclusion strategy for their organization. And it's literally step-by-step. A lot of the questions that you asked specifically about social change, this book was written, I don't know, 4 years ago, I think, 4 years ago now. And this is Revolutionize Now. This book, I think, would be very helpful for a lot of people asking those questions like, how do I speak up? For example, there's a chapter called Call a Spade a Spade. And I talk about ways that you can step up, ways that you can create dialogue. How do you demand and expose different things going on in your organization? That's in there. Studying different types of revolutionaries all over the world to use them as examples. So those are 2 resources that, you know, people can utilize and go through either by themselves or with a friend or maybe someone that's different from them. So yeah.
Cool. So they can get that at jadamonicadrew.com. Just go under what, books?
Yes. Resources, store, books. Yeah, books.
Good deal. Well, I appreciate you, Jada. I appreciate you coming on, sharing your opinion and encouraging conversations. I know a lot of people, you know, however you feel that we need to move forward, but I think we all can agree that we need to move forward. We need to move forward as a people, as a collective, as a community. Community is common unity. Like we have a common goal, a common unification objective. So I'm excited about what's to come. And I appreciate all of you tuning in. Make sure you check out jadamonicadrew.com and plug into the Odell Bazell Show. Go to the odellbazellshow.com to hear about our next one. Jada, we'll see you on the next one. Everybody, you know how we do. We see y'all at the top, not from the top. God bless.
Thanks, Odell.
Black Jesus, send the reparations.